Okay, we're recording now.
Okay, I've got 30 more seconds. My watch, I think my watch is slow. Let's go with my computer time. 7 o'clock. Let's have the flag salute and call to order. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to
the
the
republic
republic
for which it stands,
stands
one
one
nation,
nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
liberty and justice for all. You have to read lips to do it right. So do we have any topics on the floor? Oh, we don't have any minutes, so we're skipping that. We'll get that next month. Any topics on the floor not on the public hearing agenda? I mean, topics from the people in the audience. If you could.
Yeah, most of them look like people here for the first item.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and start that. So it's 7:01 and we're continuing deliberations for the Schlumpberger partition.
Okay.
We've got a packet of information. You wanna bring that up, set that up, Jacob?
Sure. So you have all the stuff that was sent to you for our meeting last month. And then if you recall, there was a request to keep the record open for a bunch of written testimony and final written argument by the applicant. And we've received that stuff. And then that's what was mailed to you for this month's meeting, was just the new stuff. So now you have the stuff sent you to before, and then the new stuff, and that's your body of work to review and contemplate your decision for this matter. Now, the record, because the previous record of the partition was included, I have all that stuff on my computer if anybody wants to reference any previous documents. And if anybody has any questions about any things, this is your chance to talk. The public hearing's over, so no testimony or anything like that. This is your time to deliberate and ideally tonight make a decision. So I have some ideas, but I don't want to pollute your thoughts with mine. So
could you refresh us on LUBA?
the LUBA outcome?
Yes.
Sure, yeah. So, you know, the original decision, I'll just go through the history really brief. So the original decision sometime last year started with me as a city planning administrator, and that was issued. And then we had some comments from neighbors and some other attorneys. And we amended that decision. And then that, which was an approval with conditions. And as I mentioned last month, you know, one of the things to kind of consider is that default of approving it with the turnout that's been talked about quite a bit at this point. And that was appealed to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission denied it based on that large drain field easement. That was appealed again to the Land Use Board of Appeals, LUBA. And, you know, there was some finagling there. Eventually, I think based on separate circumstances, there was some testimony about that last month. The famous or infamous, depending on who you are, drain field easement was extinguished or removed from the deed. And the application at Luba was actually withdrawn in order to submit a brand spanking shiny new application, which is before you today.
So we made no decisions.
Yeah, so right now there is no decision, yeah. And basically that last time, the way it ran its course, there wasn't an effort to push it through Luba to get them to make a decision. It was withdrawn. So really it's been in limbo this whole time. And there was a request by one of the attorneys to include the old record into the new file. So it is a new application, but we have all that body of work from the past for you to consider. The issue that we picked on last time was road access. Of course, anything you may have observed in the record is fair game for discussions. But the clear one is access. And I've looked over the old stuff at this point too. And I can give my input depending on how the discussion evolves with you folks. So that's where we're at. So right now, as we presented last month, there's a question about the access. Do you think the access is too woefully inadequate, even with the turnout, to allow the partition at all? And if that's how you feel, then you could consider a denial. If you feel that the turnout satisfies the inadequacies in access under the circumstances and for the purposes of allowing a new parcel on this road, then it can be approved with conditions, and we can kind of talk about those. There is a list of proposed conditions in the report, and so if you're, you could approve with conditions as spelled out in the report, and I would probably just have a couple minor additions based on some stuff I read. But those are your obvious choices. Now that's choice A and B. There's C, D, E, F, G, H, I, etc., so on and so forth. That's possible, depending on how much you want to delve into other items.
Jake, wasn't this a driveway to begin with? Belton Road?
Yes.
There was testimony about it being a driveway. What I don't know is how long that public right-of-way has been there.
Well, that's my next question. What's the history? How did this get approved to begin with?
Wasn't
And that,
Brownlows? Wasn't that
No,
for
Brownlows are further down at the beginning. No, how did it get approved as a street access?
I don't know the history on that, but we do have places in town that have unusual access just based on the age. I know that the house in question, given our research of the sewer system and the drain field itself, was built in the 70s, and the pressurized private sewer system was installed in the late 80s, early 90s. I don't know what the oldest house was, and the history that led up to those lots being created wasn't really part of the discussion or the record. And frankly, that's not
Oh,
something.
I know it wasn't. I just, curiosity, how it got to this point.
And the easy answer is a lack of clear rules in the past, and that's why we have rules now.
That's where I'm stuck, that it doesn't even meet Skinny Street standards. And I think we're going to have this discussion again on the other side from the Gray Cliff side, because there's property, significant parcel over there that's been on and off the market for several years now. And I think we're gonna have this discussion again, so that's what concerns me. Of
Yeah,
this one, it doesn't even meet skinny street standards.
not at all.
Bicycle.
Can the street be brought up as opposed to blasted down? Does that make sense?
Yeah, with
Yeah.
I
Phil,
have not walked Belton Road, so I don't know if it goes off on the sides or goes up. In other
both,
words,
a little bit of both. I think it would be a challenge, and rebuilding an entire road would be disproportional for the partition.
well, I understand that, but still. I'm just curious whether it could be brought up on the side. Oh, I didn't keep that.
And
And
Dan,
like where it's 17 feet. Is there 3 feet to one side or, I mean,
Sorry, Dan.
I don't know. I should have gone over and walked it, but I have not even walked that way.
How much more future development could we have down that road?
we talked about that to some degree. And let me find that.
And with the new house bill, are we doubling that? I mean, potentially.
Well, with the new code being, yeah, we could double every
that's-
house there,
yeah.
had a whole nother
It,
house.
it said 4 lots, which could be 8, you know,
Well, everybody on the street could add a.
Exactly.
duplex, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the things we talked about is, creating a parcel is an entitlement to development as allowed. But let me find the numbers. So there's about 10 dwellings that access it now. And
It's six, and
we
then
think
it-
about
Four to
14
six.
It
lots or
could go to
so.
20. It should be 40 vehicles.
14-ish lots. We don't know what all is a lot of record versus just a tax lot, right? That was kind of our estimate. But there are some other lots that can be developed that
How
already
many was that,
exist.
Jacob?
Excuse me?
How many was that, Jacob, that you,
14 lots.
okay,
Say half of that decided to go duplexes, then,
then you've got 28 residencies.
well, now, not everybody, but I mean, just,
No, but I'm saying the possibility is there.
well, yeah.
So some people have talked about in the future, having a local improvement district to bring the road up to code. What if we thought about every single partition or development from here out, at least pay whatever portion that would be appropriate if there was an LID? If there was an LID, everybody on the street would pay for some chunk of it, right?
Right.
So you're not making one property owner pay for the whole thing. They're just paying for the little chunk they would be responsible for. Would that be reasonable?
Well, typically what we've done is require a waiver of remonstrance, which
Yeah.
waives the right to vote no against the formation of the district. So that provides a little extra footing for the potential of a LID to take place in the future, although it doesn't guarantee anything. And right now, based on the draft conditions, the requirement is that turnout be installed before the partition is approved or final.
But the letter remonstrance, what's it called again?
Waiver of remonstrance.
Waiver of remonstrance, not a monster here. Is that guaranteeing a certain number of dollars that they would pay if it ever happened? What is it
No.
saying? What is it saying?
It's just saying there's a couple voting opportunities. One, there's an opportunity to vote on whether or not you form a LID. And I think there's a second opportunity that may be about value. I haven't dealt with it that much. But that's why I say it just increases the odds that a formation of a LID would succeed.
I thought in other cases where we a sidewalk would have been appropriate, but there are no sidewalks on the side of the street, so we had this thing you just talked about. And that which meant they would be on the hook for this sidewalk when it came along. Is that not right?
That's true. I believe that.
Yeah,
Well, are they proposing to develop the street in front of their project as much as an LID or improving that road? Would that portion meet the requirements of an LID?
I don't know. They would have to determine there's an inadequacy and everybody had to work together. Based on the testimony we've received, people enjoy the way things are, and I'm not sure. At least based on the stuff in the record, people wouldn't be too thrilled about substantial widening.
The actions
But-
of one homeowner are all of a sudden going to put a financial burden on the rest of the street. I mean, potentially put a financial burden on street improvements that nobody else wants.
Well, I was commenting on if you decided to develop one of those lots or improve your house, put a duplex on it, then you would be required to improve that section of street that you are on.
Oh, I see.
I know
I see.
it's sort of piecemeal, but what it does, it puts it right on the property owner and sort of goes to what they're trying to do. Maybe we would require something more for them to do further or whatever. But if anybody did anything further on that street, they would have to bring it up to a certain standard or, you know, in front of their property. And I know that's piecemeal, but it's just one thing I wanted to throw out there.
Yeah,
That's
well,
one
we have a couple options when a lot is developed. We can require the frontage improvements, which usually for a house is just the sidewalk, not a lot of street that needs to be done. Or if that's impractical, we can require a fee in lieu of, which would be the equivalent of the frontage improvements.
Right.
And that's a payment that goes into a pool, although it's not a Belton Road pool, it is a public passage pool citywide. And if it was developed without requiring things like a turnout, chances are we would do the fee in lieu. But that's an increment.
But
And
that doesn't mean it'll ever get improved.
that's correct.
How does that get not lost? Is that?
We cross our fingers and hope that finance puts it in the right category.
Okay.
Oh, the shell game.
But as proposed by the applicant, several people have mentioned it. There's that turnout at the blind corner. Remember, the blind corner is a particular interesting issue in this case, which happens to be adjacent to the applicant's property.
Are these properties all connected to city sewer, or are some of them with,
None of them are on sewer. No.
Most, if not all, are on the step system, which is a septic tank effluent pump system. So they still have a tank in the ground that is pressurized, and that pumps it into the pipe that goes up to the sewer gravity line. And when we first got this partition, we needed something from an engineer that stated there was capacity in that system, which there was, and that's why from the beginning we didn't make sanitary sewer service that much of a deal.
And they have water there, obviously,
Yes.
down the street. Road department ever said anything about that road or problems, or it has to be maintained by the city, doesn't it?
Yeah, the city does do some things. We didn't get any specific comments from Public Works.
What is that street made of? Is it oil over rock? Is it blacktop? What is it out there in that area? I've looked and it seems so much different than the rest of the city streets. It's-
It is
Not really
probably,
straight.
it's probably asphalt over predominantly rock. It's a very rocky area.
I'm kind of curious how the width of Belton, because I've been down both, compares to that end of Gray Cliffs. I know that a lot of the houses over on that funny side of Gray Cliffs, they have to be sprinkled, have sprinklers because it's inadequate for the fire department to get down there. So I'm curious as to, I don't know what the difference in width of the street is, and maybe that's old code or something, I'm not sure, because those houses were probably built in the 70s also.
Yeah, there's just not a lot of new houses, and it's been a while since I've been down that one. If memory serves me, it feels the same, but my focus has been on this part.
Yeah.
And if you look in the record, when there has been mention from whoever was acting as the fire marshal at the time, this has gone off that there's been a couple people, all of them mentioned fire sprinklers, and that's pretty classic. Well, access isn't that good, but we can always sprinkle it.
Yeah.
So that's probably inevitable in this case.
But it has to be sprinkled.
Yeah. Mhm. It's not our decision. That's one, it's kind of a joint decision between the building official and fire marshal. But the testimony that we've received from those official folks has been clear about the sprinklers.
So I finally found in the record of the drawing showing the proposed vehicle turnout 24 by 30 it seems to be right at the apex of the corner, but was that determined by a traffic engineer or from site distances, or how was that determined where that would go?
Well, I would call this an example. That was added to the plan after the appeal. And in the conditions, it said, well, we know it's going to be an access way greater than 150 feet, so we're going to need a turnaround. We never requested it to be shown. I think they just wanted to show it in the plan just for extra evidence that it could be done. But this hammerhead design comes from the locally adopted this. And that has some various turnaround standards. So it's basically the fire code turnaround standard, at least one of a few examples that there are.
I appreciate you pointing that out, but that wasn't what I was talking about. I was talking about I was talking about the pullout at the sharp corner.
Okay,
So
sorry.
I'm asking why was that placement placed by a traffic engineer or site distances? Is it randomly placed, or
Okay, no, that's a really good question. So if you were going to allow, so
anyone knows what he said?
the circumstances are peculiar. It doesn't meet any standard. We have a private road standard, which would normally be in a private road, not a public road. And so if you were to entertain the pullout, you would have to be comfortable, given the unusual circumstances, to allow the turnout in trade for allowing another lot entitled to development. That turnout comes from the city's own private road standards for when there's lengths where you may need to pass someone that the turnout's required. So that's where the 24 by 30 standard comes from. In the original decision, I believe it just said, well, we think there should be a turnout somewhere that makes sense. Then we received comments from the neighbors, and one of those mentioned this blind corner issue. So in the amended decision, we kind of looked at that going, yeah, you know, that's kind of a dicey area. And it's one place where if you're leaving the area and you get to that blind corner, when you turn that corner, there's nowhere to pass in between there and about the Elks property. There's kind of the driveway used by one of the people who, one of the neighbors who's been very much involved in this. But otherwise, there's really nowhere to pass. So that's a good opportunity to be able to see up the road, and you can see quite a ways, you know, so it gives you an opportunity to see if someone's coming and pull off, or good, I don't see anybody. Chances are pretty good I'm not going to encounter someone continuing to exit the site. And so it was based on testimony of, it was a combination of our private road standard and testimony from the neighbors initially, which has been kind of accepted by the applicant, the neighbors, the fire district is, yes, we think this is a good idea. So it has been an evolution, but that's how it came to be.
So I've always thought it was 24 by 30 pullout, but that's actually 24 feet, including the road. So it's really only 12 feet by 30 foot pullout off of the road. So it's only the width of a lane. That's it. Same width as the road. So, I mean, is that enough? Is that getting you far enough off the road? Kind of just barely, for making a corner. You know, some big SUV or something going around the corner, it's going to need a little bit more turning radius than maybe 12 feet.
Yeah,
Anyway.
it's larger than a parking space.
Yeah, but a parking space is not an active
Yes.
space. It's a static space.
Well, how are trucks gonna bring lumber and whatever in to build this home with that blind corner? They aren't gonna be able to maneuver it, are they?
They don't go around the corner.
What do they do? Just back up the road?
Well, they'll take a left right there at the corner to go into the property.
Then they've got the hammerhead turnaround when they get to the site.
Yeah,
But having that turnout, if you're a passenger vehicle exiting, it gives you an opportunity to look up the road, make sure one of those lumber trucks is not coming. If they are, you can pull off. If you don't see anybody, you can continue on your way.
Just seems very minimally sized to me when there's a lot of right-of-way space there.
Yeah, there's a lot of right of way.
But
There's
that's
also
more.
a lot of topography.
Even on that side towards their house.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a good picture of that. How many of you visited the area?
I have. It's been a while, but I've been there.
I have two.
It's been a while since I've been there too.
There's a photograph in the packet from the previous month. It's not a lot of change in topography on that corner. Just
no.
No.
Yeah, it's been 20 years since I've been.
Wow.
The problem is that's a standard we can point to. Otherwise, we're making up numbers.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
Yeah. And unless you want to talk about you know, public street standards where you have the 20-foot width, or for a skinny street, which is still in effect, or the local street, which is a lot more. But as we know, a lot of it's only a one-lane driveway. So the idea is we're trying to improve that to some degree at this critical location.
If they did a half street improvement on Skinny Street, they would be adding 10 feet, not the 12 with this pullout. So this is actually better.
Yeah, for that specific pinpoint area.
Yeah.
Would you ever ask them to improve more of the right of way that wasn't in front of their property?
That's not really something we ever discussed in this long journey that we've had.
I don't know if that's the answer, but I mean, I'm trying to go back to people that are on that street, and any future development would be improved upon anything happening there, but I don't know.
It is, let me share screen. So the one area that's going to be kind of widened by default. So here's Belton Road, and then it branches off into Gray Cliffs Drive. And this current road is a little bit on this property here, and then a little bit on the subject property here. Now the driveway for what would be the vacant parcel along with some riverfront property or riverfront property line there, they're supposed to have a minimum 10-foot wide driveway that has to be wholly on this parcel. It can't be on the opposite one because the easement for this parcel is wholly on parcel 1 here. So that means if this portion is 10 feet wide and they choose to hug this property line, it's going to widen this street a little bit right here. Although conceivably they could put it back here and do something like that. People generally like to be efficient though, so I would guess they're just going to put it along there and then branch off somewhere there. But this here is this is private. This is not a public road here. This is the public road. And so when we talk about doing public improvements, it would be focusing on this area here. So if the planning commission is contemplating approval, there's a couple things to consider. Proposed condition 9 talks about tree replacement, specific location. We need to know where that's at. In one of the previous decisions, we had some added language to the condition that the city recommends that trees be planted in the general area where they were removed for neighborly courtesy. There's nothing in our code that compels us to say the replacement tree has to be here. So that's why it's a recommendation based on neighborly courtesy. So that would be an added sentence to condition 9. Condition 10 talks about this partition does not allow impacts to sensitive lands. There are several easements on this property, and that includes a walking access easement. Let me share a screen again. There's a 10-foot walking access easement on this side of the ordinary high water line. So the property owner here can get to their property, which is also under a similar ownership over here. And that easement language, it has some interesting stuff in it. It talks about paths shall not be improved in any manner in order to preserve a natural or organic appearance. So in addition to our sensitive lands, there's this easement language which kind of talks about preserving the natural area, and that may be a private obstacle to development of the shoreline. It's not germane to the partition itself. It really doesn't make or break it, but we like to put breadcrumbs in places, especially when there's a lot of easements in this case. And so we would want to, at least my recommendation on approval would be to add that as a breadcrumb under number 10. So any future person is aware of that easement if something was proposed along the shore. Of course, they still have to deal with Oregon Division of State Lands, Army Corps of Engineers, if it goes out into the water, and our own sensitive land rules. So that would be just a minor thing for condition 10. I would also want to make sure the findings are clear that the turnout, if a turnout or other road improvements are determined necessary by the Planning Commission, that they are mandatory, not voluntary, which was discussed in the record. And there was also a suggested condition from the applicants to limit development to one dwelling. And that makes me uncomfortable for a lot of reasons. There was some debate that if it's a condition of approval, it's not a CC&R, which you couldn't do. It's not a land use regulation, which you couldn't do. So then maybe it would pass muster, at least with House Bill 2001, which we've talked about exhaustively with this group, with our code amendments. But there's no case law because it's new. It's contrary to really the intent of the bill, where duplexes and single family dwellings are treated the same. Our own code, new code language that is proposed to be adopted around June 4th. It talks about lots eligible for single dwellings and duplexes are treated the same from a density standpoint, from a skinny street standpoint, because we're not supposed to prejudice duplexes. Going back a little further, if we go to Senate Bill 1051, which was from the 2017 legislative session, that's where a city greater than 2,500 has to allow auxiliary dwelling units, which is that second dwelling unit on a single parcel. And with our code amendments, we said that that second unit may count as that ADU for the purposes of compliance. So it's kind of murky in my view. And also, let's talk about future staff. So this condition would live in the partition file. And at about the same time, we're adopting these rules that say we're supposed to look at duplexes similarly. I think that condition would catch anybody off guard, and it's just impractical. So that was suggested as a way to limit it. It is something the Planning Commission can entertain, but I can't guarantee that's going to hold any.
I have a question for you on the duplex issue. There is the possibility of a duplex may be built, or a duplex may not be built, it may be a single family. Who gets to choose? Seems to me the person building it would have a say in whether or not they were going to make it two houses together on a lot, or whether they were going to use the lot for one house.
That is correct. Based on the
They do.
rules, based on the rules to be adopted, that is correct. But in this case, one of the things we're finagling about are new parcels, new burden on a substandard road. And that's why the applicants suggested that we impose a one dwelling unit only per lot condition to help satisfy that concern if it exists. And I just kind of went over the reasons why it's a little worrisome for me to do that.
I don't
But-
think we can impose that.
It's within your authority to place that. I just can't guarantee it's going to hold up in the coming years.
I don't think it would.
One either.
So that was a condition recommended, and there was the tree language, the additional sensitive land stuff, given that walking easement, and making sure that the turnout or whatever improvements we talk about are mandatory, not voluntary under the circumstances. You know, that's if you recommend approval. I just want to make sure that I got that out as part of this.
Well, minimally in front of their two lots, the portion that's theirs needs to be brought up to at least Skinny Street. 12 feet will do that. But the frontage of their property needs it. It's on the road belt,
So you're talking about this stretch here.
on Belton, yeah.
Isn't that what they propose to do? Make it wide enough?
They propose the 24 by 30 turnout here at that blind corner.
Mhm.
That's kind of been the discussion.
I understand that, but I think it needs to be brought up to at least the corner of the property there.
I don't think that solves the problem, though.
No, it doesn't at this point. But the other houses would have to do theirs then too. I'm really uncomfortable with this whole thing, so. It's a problem.
Well, that's where I was going back to widen the road the whole distance of their property.
That's what I'm saying.
Turnout. And then anybody else that wanted to get, build a house there or make it a duplex would have to do the same. And you'd have a lot of wide spots in the road, but you know, the city's gonna come through and improve the whole thing, and that's not gonna happen, so.
And Russ, did you say widen the whole thing? I guess Russ and Audrey, with the turnout too, or just the widening to this Skinny Street standard?
Well, I'd like the turnout too because of the corner it's on, but I would like the whole
Okay.
Yeah, I think that,
brought at least Skinny Street standard.
right.
Because whenever you're going to get that opportunity to widen this road, if every single time they do a development, it's like, oh, you know, it's all small. We'll let them buy this time too.
Yeah,
And then eventually you just have a skinny road to a whole bunch of houses.
Sure.
Yeah, I think,
Whole bunch of houses in a treed area where a fire could be really, really scary.
well, all of St. Helens would be scary, but that's one reason they're gonna require the sprinkling the houses too, down in there. I don't think a fire marshal would ever, building permit wouldn't allow anything else.
I think that is a good idea.
And it's not very expensive to do.
I don't think we can require the sprinkling system. Didn't the fire marshal recommend that?
Yeah, that's going to be a fire marshal, building official effort, but under these circumstances, it's pretty much inevitable.
After
I'm
the
not sure about that.
if you haven't been down Belton Road, to me, when I drive down there, it seems like I'm driving down a driveway.
It initially was, Jennifer. I'm almost positive of that.
Just think that this spotty, the people that live there a long time and don't want to do any improvements, then they're not likely to widen their part. And so you're gonna have.
You can have a lot of turnouts is what you're gonna have, yeah.
You're gonna have a lot of turnouts. It's an inconsistent street.
And that's not a bad thing, to have a lot of turnouts.
Well, so there's an idea to have the turnout and for the remainder to be widened to our current skinny street standard, which is the 20 feet.
Yes.
And that's also the minimum typical minimum fire standard.
I'm supportive of that, but I won't be able to vote on that.
So if that's the case, then I'm just helping to spur you along. So that would be your road condition, and that is mandatory, not voluntary. And then the other things to consider is that the good neighbor tree language, which is a recommendation, not an imposition. And then just noting that walkway easement is another layer to consider if anything is proposed out here, any actual improvement. And there may not be anything proposed that may not ever matter.
I think those are all good additions.
And the duplex language?
Oh yeah, and then if you want to give it a shot, you can propose that development on those parcels is restricted to one dwelling unit. That is a roll of the dice, in my opinion, but it may hold.
Jennifer, do you think this sets enough of a precedence for anything else going on there?
Well, like I said at the beginning, I have concerns that we're going to be having this discussion when the property on the other side of the Great Cliffs.
Yeah, and I guess that, you have to make this one start the history, I guess.
Yeah.
Invent the wheel.
Well, it certainly would be a benchmark to use when the next one comes up.
It'd be a whole lot less road to widen because you're not doing the whole thing. So it'd be chunks at a time. So do we have, are we done with discussion? Do we have a time, a demotion at this point? Who wants to make?
Are we requesting any improvement of the driveway off of Belton Road in front of their property?
We do have a condition for the driveway that's going to go through here for this parcel.
Mm-hmm.
There is a condition in there now that says fire marshal approval of driveway design shall be required and included in the plans for applicable building/development permits. And then the second part of that is plans as part of the building development permits shall show a minimum 10-foot wide paved driveway width or additional requirements of the fire marshal from Belton Road to the dwelling or other principal use proposed. This must be within the easements on parcel 1 benefiting parcel 2. So that's what I was talking about. Their 10-foot driveway may kind of increase the total width down here since it has to be entirely on this parcel. I don't know what the fire marshal is going to say. They may be okay with the 10-foot driveway as long as it has an adequate turnaround. But our minimum width for 1 or 2 dwellings is 10 feet, but we know it's well more than 150 feet in length, and that's where we want to make sure we have fire marshal input in that design. So long story short, Sheila, yes.
Okay,
Already there.
appreciate it. Thank you.
So is someone ready to make a motion? So brewing about it.
I don't think I want to.
Now, I can't make a motion of staff, but I can recommend what I'm hearing and someone can take that ball and run with it. So what I'm hearing is for the road, the entire portion that abuts the property to Skinny Street standards, which is currently 20 feet. It was 20 feet at the time we received the application. In addition to the turnout.
Basically, in this case, the turnout will be 2 feet wider if this is a 12-foot road. Right?
4 feet wider.
Well, if it's a 12-foot road, you're adding 12 feet. So, okay, you're right. It would be 8 feet wider.
So those improvements, the good neighbor tree language, and let me just repeat what I mean by that. City recommends trees be replanted in the general area. They were removed for neighborly courtesy. That's again, just a recommendation. We have no legal basis to say it shall go there. And that would be just an additional language to condition 9, additional language to condition 10 would call out that walking easement that talks about preserving a natural and organic appearance in that area. And that's just breadcrumbs for staff in the future. And then making sure that these road improvements are mandatory and for the partition to be approved. And that would just be in the findings. And the condition, and then the other condition, if you're comfortable with it, restricting development to 1 dwelling unit per parcel.
I favor that.
I don't think that's gonna fly.
Either.
I think it's
Nor do
waste-
I.
So one motion could be everything I just said, except for the development restriction, or everything I said, or of course, nothing, and a completely different motion.
I can't make a motion.
It's very interesting that nobody's willing to make a motion, so all of us seem to be uncomfortable in one way or another.
Yeah,
Means that everybody, not everybody has been down there lately. And I hate to suggest we put this on hold. Would we want to actually physically look at the whole thing? Would that help anybody? Do a meeting and walk that whole street and get a feel for it? I haven't been down there in 8 years, so, and a lot of people haven't been down there. Was that anything to consider?
I'd be willing to go for a walk with the rest of you guys,
Yeah, but that
or
means
some.
we have to hold this over.
Yeah, and if we had a bunch of commissioners, that would be,
The forum.
it would,
Well-
yeah, you would be a group together and if you wanted to, we did that once with the council several years ago. I'd want to look and see how we did that. Maybe have a break and so we can come back and kind of, because that could be, well, that's going to be a new ex parte contact and could open the door. It could open the door to some things. And I would just back up and stress the importance of site visits when we get these applications.
Yes.
Okay.
Patrick, let me know if you ever want to be unmuted. We have it so that participants cannot.
And as a counselor, you can participate in the discussion. You're not a voting member, but you can participate. If you choose, you're not obligated.
So would it help to think about if we were to deny this, why are we denying it? Instead of if we're accepting it, here's the conditions that we would accept it in. So
Well, the denial would be based on the fact that access is inadequate for both private and public road standards. Bringing it up to full standards is grossly disproportional to just cutting a piece of property in two. And you're creating a new parcel with entitlements. And that's in the report. So if you feel like the needle is going that direction, that would be your basis for denial. And that was supported by some of the other testimony in it. But then if you think that the improvements to the road are enough to justify a new parcel, then we look at the conditions.
I'd be willing to make that motion,
what motion?
a motion to deny based on inadequate access as stated by.
I'll
I'll
second.
second it.
All right. Let's see. So I need a vote. I'm going to call your name and please give me your vote. So Commissioner Lawrence,
Aye.
Commissioner Simling,
For the denial.
for the denial, yes.
You're voting
That's
yes.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Commissioner Pugsley,
Yes,
Commissioner Robert,
Yes.
who am I missing? Commissioner Webster.
Yes. I think Christina, you're missing.
Oh, forgot about Christina.
She's muted.
What's your vote? Christina's not a voter member.
Christina is support staff.
Or staff.
Shauna's not
don't
here.
just, oh, Shauna, yeah.
Shauna's not here.
How's
Okay.
here?
At least I don't think she's here. I haven't seen her.
Is not.
Okay, that's everyone.
So it sounds unanimous.
We denied it.
And then motion for signature.
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Lawrence,
Aye.
Semlin,
Aye.
Pugsley,
aye.
Hubbard,
Aye.
Webster.
Aye.
All right. I'll
Okay,
come,
thank you.
I'll come down and sign it. Hey. Right, it is, what time is it now? I have 7:58. PM. The public hearing is now open. This is a quasi-judicial land use hearing. The subject of this hearing is a request for annexation. The subject property is identified on the county assessor's map as lot 1800 and 2900 on map 4N1W8BD and 4N1W8CA. The applicant is Mark Comfort. The owner is the same. Because quasi-judicial proceedings observe the observance require the observance of certain procedural formalities, we will take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the commission wish to declare an ex parte conflict of interest or bias in this matter?
I just want to say that Mark Comfort has worked on some of my properties, so doesn't affect my decision in one way or another.
And I have to say, as a employee of the Department of State Lands, I did act on a fence, potential violation from a fence on the same property, and I found no violation. Anyone else? Okay. Does anyone from the audience object to the ability of a commissioner to make a fair decision? Tell Jenny or Jacob. Anybody?
No, there's kind of a mass exodus. There's a couple phone numbers. I'm not seeing anything.
Generally, the order of proceedings will be as follows: required statements, staff report, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, neutral testimony, those opposed, rebuttal by applicant, final questions, close of the record, deliberations, and decision. The following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to the City Code ORS 197.7635. Following is a list of the applicable substantive criteria for this decision. City of St. Helens Municipal Code 17.28.030, the approval standards for annexation. St. Helens Municipal Code 17.08.040, 1A. St. Helens Municipal Code 17.08.060. St. Helens Municipal Code 17.112.030. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the applicable substantive criteria as described, or other criteria in the plan, such as the comprehensive plan or land use regulations, such as that found in the development code, which the person believes applies to this the decision. Failure to raise an issue, including constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval in this hearing, in person or in writing, or failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the approving authority an opportunity to respond to the issue, precludes appeal to the LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals, on that issue, and precludes an action for damages in circuit court. All right, staff, do you have a report for us?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So everyone should see Google Earth here. I'm just wanting to point out where we are. So here's Highway 30. The white building here is Les Schwab Auto Center, Tire Center. And then our subject property is right about where my cursor is here. It should look fairly familiar. We did an annexation of this property a couple months ago. You recommended approval, and you'll see a lot of similarities in zoning between this and the subject property. So this property is owned by Mark Comfort, and he is in the process of developing a travel trailer park. And Jacob has been reviewing its a county file. It was under the jurisdiction of the county when he applied for this travel trailer park. And as part of that approval, he is required to connect to city sewer, which is available in Kavanaugh here. And so that's why we're entertaining an annexation, because in order to connect to city utilities, you have to annex into our rules. I did notice there's a staff report error on the first page. It talks about the property owner wanting to connect to city water. That's actually incorrect.
Right, McNulty.
It's going to connect into McNulty water. So I will make that fix before this goes to council. That's why you double check. So let's look at the normal things we look at with annexations.
Jenny,
Yes.
weren't we also recommended the county decision, sent us the county decision? It looks familiar.
Sent the referral?
Yeah, for referral, that's what I meant.
I don't know. Jacob, do you send county referrals to the commission?
It was attached to a department report
Mm,
many
Yeah.
months ago.
Is this similar to the ones down here in the marina?
It's a different applicant, but it's
I
a
know that.
similar development concept.
I know
for
Mark.
Travel. Yeah, yeah.
Go ahead, Jenny. Sorry for interrupting you.
No, that's okay. So the property's just under, or it's just over 3.5 acres in size. I mentioned that it's going to be on McNulty Water and that it's going to connect to city sewer, which is kind of along this undeveloped right of way here. So surrounding zoning, we just looked at this parcel here. It's currently zoned county commercial general C3. And it's a simple one. Our only annexation option, or I'm sorry, our only zoning option upon annexation is highway commercial. So there's not a lot to pick. There's not a lot to pick here. It's really just going through the process and making sure our utilities can support the annexation, which we know we have an woefully oversized sewer system, wastewater treatment plant. So we can definitely support this added sewer. I would note, we always look at frontage improvements. So Kavanaugh is undeveloped currently. It's all gravel. And as part of the county's decision, they're going to be putting in some sidewalks and a driveway approach as pictured and included in your staff report, just along this kind of northern end. And so that's a condition of approval of this annexation, that those frontage improvements come in. So that's really what makes this stand out. The zoning will be highway commercial upon annexation, and we will change our comp plan from unincorporated to incorporated. This isn't subject to voter approval because it's adjacent to city-owned or city jurisdiction property, and that's kind of the gist. Are there any questions?
Jenny, does it matter if there are wetlands on the property, if they've been delineated or not for this stage?
For annexations, we get into what is classified as buildable land, but it's mostly related to residential zone property. And so it doesn't apply in this case. Yeah.
Because I know there's a wetland on the property that was being delineated at one time. It's never been completed as far as I know. But
These going to be long-term sites?
The city can't limit stays on travel trailer parks.
Okay.
ORS prevents us from limiting duration of stay.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah, it used to be in our code for 30 days, but that was actually
30
a
days.
change we made this past code amendment cycle.
Oh, that's kind of good because I guess then it could be a tiny home, affordable housing.
Yeah.
I will add, in my conversations with Mr. Comfort, he's talked about more long-term than short-term. He's trying to avoid Breaking Bad type RVs.
Oh,
Any other questions, guys?
I have a comment. If it works out similarly to the marina here, the tenants seem to be very stable and there are not very many turnovers. This is not here at the river. It is a community that seems to be more or less permanent. I don't know if this would be a stop and go travel trailer park or if it would be something that would turn into a neighborhood. Those are comments and not necessarily intended to be judgments.
You want to move for approval?
we're not deliberating at this time, so we're just asking questions. So any other questions of staff? Yeah, we can go to the applicant. If the applicant's here, do they have a presentation they'd like to give?
Don't believe I see the applicant here. If any,
Didn't know if they had a representative or not.
Yeah, it's hard with phone numbers. One of the phone numbers could be them. I don't know how we typically deal with that, Jacob.
Their likely representative would be Andrew Nemi or someone with Lower Columbia. And I reckon they would not be showing up as a phone number.
Yeah, I don't think this is a controversial thing where they would come to present either.
So do we have anybody who have testimony in support of this application? Just have to ask.
Mhm.
And anyone a neutral testimony? Or anyone in opposition to the application? If you
We're
can
just looking for raised hands. I
let
don't
Jenny
anticipate
know.
raised hands for this, but you never know.
Or send chat. Yep.
Or a chat, yes.
Give you
Seems-
half a minute here to figure out where that raised hand is.
And I'm not
It would be
seeing,
on their screen.
Okay,
and I'm not
all right.
seeing either, so.
all right, we don't need a rebuttal from the applicant, so the final questions of the commission?
Do we need anything as far as hiding the garbage cans and that?
Not yet.
So
We're
the
not at
develop-
that point, are we?
The
No.
development proposal was approved by the county with comments from city staff for our own standards that we'd like to.
Okay, so
include.
that's already been done.
Yes,
Okay,
Yep.
so we need a motion
I
of
do.
the annex with frontage improvements.
yep,
We're not-
exactly, as staff written, yep.
I
Yeah.
do have a question about sewage. Are they gonna have a system in that park so that the vehicles that come in have a place to dump their potties? Or are they gonna have to go and find someplace else to dump their potties and come and go and come and go?
They are proposing direct connections. So each site will have connections.
Thank you.
I think he
And-
has his main line already made.
And I want to make sure
Yeah.
Audrey can sleep at night. They do have a trash enclosure proposed.
If I'm up, I'll call you.
Okay.
Yeah, the development part is way more fun to look at than the annexation, I know.
So
Yeah, well, that's just kind of plain and simple.
if there are no further questions from the commission and no further responses from the staff, going, the public record is closed. This matter is returned to the table for deliberations and oral discussion if there's anything more to really talk about.
We've done it. We're done with that.
Motion to approve.
So
A
moved.
second?
We've already got it.
Yeah, and this is
So-
recommend approval to council, so there's no motion. for
Yeah.
sign at this
Oh.
time.
Okay. We think it's cool.
Perfect, thanks.
Okay. Right. It's now 8:12 p.m. The public hearing is now open. This is a quasi-judicial land use hearing. The subject of this hearing is a request for a variance. The subject property is identified in the county assessor's map as lot 4N1W 3BA on map 2401. The applicant is Steve Pegram, and Paula Sheely. The owner is the same, and I apologize if I mispronounced your name. Because quasi-judicial proceedings require the observance of certain procedural formalities, we'll take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the commission wish to declare an ex parte conflict of interest, or bias in this matter? All right. Does anyone from the audience object to the ability of a commissioner to make a fair decision? Seeing none or hearing about none, the order of proceedings will be as follows. Required statements, staff report, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, neutral testimony, those opposed, or rebuttable applicant, final questions, close of the record, deliberations, and decision. The following statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to the city code and ORS 197.79635. The following is a list of the applicable substantive criteria for this decision. City of St. Helens Municipal Code 17.108.050. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the applicable substantive criteria as described or other criteria in the plan, such as the comprehensive plan or land use regulation, such as that found in the development code, which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue, including constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval in this hearing in person or in writing, or failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the approving authority an opportunity to respond to the issue, precludes appeal to LUBA, the Land Use Board of Appeals, in that issue, and precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Staff, you have a report?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, let me share my screen here, show us where we are. So this site should be familiar to everyone who's been downtown. We are on South First, looking at this property here. Now this proposal has evolved, and I'll get into that and why. But first, I just want to talk about the property itself. So this property is what's considered a through lot, meaning it's got frontage on 2 streets. So you've got River Street down below and South First on the other side. And back in 2020, the applicant applied for and received a street vacation because a significant portion of their rear porch and deck area encroached into the right of way. And so they were granted a 20-foot street vacation in the back along River, making their lot bigger than the standard 5,800 square foot lot. So now it's a 6,960 square foot lot. And it also brought into compliance some of those structures in the back because double frontage lots like this or a through lot like this, they have 2 front setbacks, which can be difficult to meet. So that's a little bit of history on this lot itself. You may know it by this very ugly, dilapidated
Yes.
white structure that you see when you drive along First Street. And
Yeah,
so those,
those used to be in the plaza, next to the plaza, by the way.
it got moved. Yeah.
Used to be a beauty salon.
Well, it was
Yeah,
John
that's-
Foot's attorney's office that sat right next to 50 Plaza Square before that building was built on the corner.
I think I remember hearing that at one point.
Oh.
So when it was moved, it was actually put encroaching into the right of way. So clearly a structure that's not meeting setback requirements and has since kind of fell in disrepair. So what this applicant was originally proposing was to demolish this structure that is, clearly within the front setback. Demolish, there's 2 kind of carport structures right here, and put in a new 2-car garage. And then in the original proposal, they had a 2nd-story dwelling. Originally, it was considered an ADU, but with our code amendments, they can build a 2nd dwelling without getting that ADU process. So that was their original plan. They also had some changes to this front entry. They were going to expand the footprint of the front entry just on the first level. So since this property is on South First Street, we sent out a notice for a scenic resource review at the same time that we sent notice out for this setback variance. And so I guess I should get into the setback variance as well. The structure they wanted to put in place of the carports required a front setback variance. So they applied for the scenic resource review, they applied for the setback variance, and we notified neighbors at the same time. We got 2 neighbors who were in opposition of the scenic resource review and submitted pictures from their home, which is what the code says to do, that their views would be significantly obstructed. I provided that testimony to the applicant, and the applicant decided to redraw their plans and not include the 2nd floor dwelling unit on top of the garage. And unfortunately, I don't have those revised plans to look at tonight. And so what I've done is focused on just the setback variance and added some conditions that address the fact that the plans may change to remove that 2nd floor. But I didn't want to delay this hearing because it's still virtually the same setback variance request. And we'll talk about the differences as we get into this. But I know that there's some neighbors here listening who did provide that testimony. And so I do want to allow them to speak and maybe talk about process as well. But so this project has evolved slightly since the original submittal. So let's look at the setback variance plan and just kind of go through. Now that you've seen photos, hopefully it's easier to visualize on the site plan what's going on. So you can see there's kind of this red line here. That's the existing building footprint. And so the proposal is not changing this entryway here. This is all just a first floor addition. And then this is kind of where the carports are now. And so those will be demolished and the footprint will then change to this darker black line. That's where the new first floor garage will go. And so the setback variance request tonight is, instead of a 20-foot front setback here, they're actually asking for a 16.5 front setback. So the variance request is 3.5 feet. Originally, they had a cantilevered second floor extension as part of the dwelling unit above those above the garage, but because that second floor isn't being proposed, or at least that's what the applicant is saying is no longer going to be proposed, the variance for tonight actually gets reduced. The request for the variance tonight will actually be reduced to 16.5 instead of 13.5. And then here's that footprint of that white ugly building here that is proposed to be removed. So that's that. So I want to go through a couple of the criteria for approving a variance. And I'm sure there'll be questions at the end, but let me just get through this. So like all variances, sometimes we have other parts of the code that are relevant. And in particular, there's this projections into yards. And it talks about having eaves that extend into required yards, but not more than 3 feet. And I noticed on the plans, the eave along the north property line was actually 2.5 feet from the property line. And so I wanted to make sure that in this variance request, we are not approving that, because that would require a separate variance and also building permit approval, because it would need to be a certain fire rated eave. So that's one of the proposed conditions. And then, as with all variances, we have criteria. So the first one, the variance will not be detrimental to the surrounding neighborhood. I have comments in here about how removal of what is a dilapidated building is certainly going to help with the detriment to the neighborhood, and also bring the property more into compliance with setbacks. And so that's what's noted here. Clearly, the neighborhood cares more about the views. And so we have a condition in there that's going to require that the scenic resource review also be approved. That way, if that gets denied, the variance is moot. And so that's addressed. With variances, we always have to find that there are unique and special circumstances. This house was built 60 years ago, and it was developed clearly with multiple setbacks that were not met. And don't meet current standards. And so, I think there's enough unique circumstances about this property that allows the commission to find that is true. It's also really rare to have a building that actually encroaches into the right of way. So that's a unique circumstance. C, that's easy. It's not a use variance. So vision clearance. This is clearly an important criteria for this variance in particular. When you're pulling out on this driveway, it's very difficult to see oncoming traffic. And so by removing this structure, the safety of those who are pulling out of this driveway is improved substantially. And so that's something the applicant noted, and also staff included in this section here. There's also currently no landscaping in the front yard. And so the applicant is proposing a permeable surface on their driveway because the entire driveway is currently asphalt. And so that will improve the natural system, the storm drainage system in the area. And that's something they've elected to do. So lastly, the variance, we have to find that the variance isn't self-imposed. They bought the property in 2018, so they did not build the structures. You know, the staff just had a question here. Given these improvements to setback compliance and the vision clearance issues, you know, the question is, does the commission feel this is the minimum necessary? And that's just something we need to make the finding of tonight. And so because of the changing plans, I also prepared a couple of additional conditions. One is that this variance shall apply to this plan as submitted, or one with equal or less yard encroachment. And that's because we know they're going to remove that second floor and that cantilevered second floor encroachment. And so I wanted a condition in here that would allow for them to submit plans that have less of a variance proposed. And so that's what number 2 is. And then number 3 addresses the scenic resource review. So my plan there is, once we get the revised plans later this week, we will send out and re-notify neighbors with the new proposal. Basically, we're amending the decision with the new proposal and allow them that same opportunity to re-comment whether or not the views will be obstructed with this new proposed single floor garage. And so number 3 just captures that. That scenic resource review is required to be approved for this variance to be vested. And number 4 is just that eve issue on the plans. Hopefully that'll get cleared up with the revised plans that don't have the second floor dwelling anyway. So that's what I have. I think now is a good time for questions.
Why don't we have complete plans?
So when I sent out the notice for the variance and the scenic resource review, it was sort of assumed that the scenic resource review wouldn't warrant so much neighborhood opposition. But I think they miscalculated how much views would actually be obstructed with the proposal. And so the applicant's addressing that with the new scenic resource review. So that's why the plans aren't done. And I think the applicant could also attest to their architect's inability to get the plans done and revised before this meeting. But the applicant can maybe address that.
Can you just educate me a little, since I'm new on this, what actually is the scenic review process? I mean, besides sending out the notices, who determines the percentages or?
Yeah, it's
What?
like one paragraph in our code.
Okay.
I can pull it up if you want to read it. I've gone through it a few times and it's actually never resulted in anything like this major. But just to summarize it, the burden of proof to demonstrate obstruction is on those that have their views being blocked. And so they've provided, 10 photos of their windows, and you can kind of visualize where the new development would be. And so it's a narrative, and it's also photos that go along with it. And I provided that narrative and photos back to the applicant, and then they have 14 days to respond. Gotcha. So it's kind of this like back and forth. And then,
Okay.
Ultimately, I guess staff decides if the testimony is valid and can choose to deny the application.
Okay. I didn't know if they needed to hire somebody to do that or what the process was. So that helps. Thank you.
Any other questions, staff?
I have a question. Are we likely to review this down the road?
Not with what's proposed conditions tonight. The neighbors will get the opportunity to re-review it, but if you approve it as these conditions show, you would be approving the plans as presented or a lesser variance. Because really what we're approving tonight isn't the height. We're only approving the setback variance from First Street, which as proposed in these plans was 16.5, but we anticipate getting plans back that are actually just going to show, I'm sorry, I said that backwards. What we show tonight is a 13.5-foot setback, but what we anticipate receiving revised plans will show a 13.5-foot
Does-
front setback.
16.
I did it again. It's,
Did it again.
16.
it's 3 feet less.
They need this to get a 2-car garage? Is it impossible to get a 2-car garage without the
That's-
variance, or what's the purpose?
That's a good question. I think the applicant can shed light on that.
So any other questions of staff before we go to the applicant? Maybe get some of those answers.
And I have one comment before testimony, because I want to make sure in case it triggers any testimony. So the condition that said this is contingent on site development review, scenic resource, and then it spelled out the file. It should say this is contingent upon a approved site development review, scenic resource. Because something can happen with this one, it goes haywire, and you still need an approved one. So hopefully, and probably it will be the one that we are working on now. But wacky things can happen, as we've seen in some of our applications. And so I would just say an approved scenic resource review.
And not cite the file number. I got you.
Okay.
I think the applicant is here. I'm going to ask him to.
He's not
it-
muted.
It actually looks like he's not connected to audio, so maybe he called in. Let me see if I can. I'm asking both to unmute, and maybe we'll get lucky with one of them being Steve.
He's connecting to audio where his picture is.
Oh, there it is. Okay, great.
Now he's muted.
Okay, cool.
This technology gets me every time.
And if you want to start your video, Steve, you're welcome to. You don't have to.
Oh, mine doesn't work.
Oh, okay, great. We can hear you great.
Good, 5x5. Thank you for your time this evening. First, I want to say when Kelly and I purchased this property originally, we were unaware that there was the view shed ordinance or whatever it's called, but we had discussed that we would not block anybody's view, whether or not it was legal to do so, because that's just not something that we would do. When we originally looked at putting the ADU on top of the garage, we went up and stood on the porch across the street. And the architect and I, we sort of said, yeah. I said, what do you think? He said, well, I don't think it will. So we drew the plans based on the best estimation of an architect. When we got the two neighbors to protest letters in, I actually went up on the roof with a tape measure and a stick and measured it and shot an azimuth and did all the things. And they are in fact correct. It would block their view. So immediately I called the planning office and said, we're taking that off today. We're not going to block anybody's view. Not a problem. My architect did not have time to get the plans ready for this meeting. I apologize for that. He anticipates having them ready this Friday. So the ADU is going away. Someone had asked a question if I needed the setback variance to make the garage big enough, and the answer is yes. We need that depth on the garage because one of my vehicles is very big. It's a Mercedes-Benz Sprinter, and so making the garage smaller is not feasible for it to be useful. As far as the eave on the side, that also is going to be redrawn in these new plans, and it will be set back. I forget what the rule is. Is it 3 feet? It'll whatever the rule is. It'll be set back 3 feet from that side, so that it'll comport. So the only variance that we're asking for is the variance from 20 feet to 16.5. You've seen the pictures. You probably all know the property right now. It's the ingress and egress is very dangerous because of that building. This will give us an expansive view of the street and make ingress and egress much safer. We're also going to do the permeable driveway to help with stormwater runoff, which right now just sort of runs beside the house and down the hill and washes your hill away. Is there anything else I needed to address on that I might have missed?
Any questions of the applicant that you think of? I think it's pretty clear.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Steve.
Steve.
Thank you.
Do we have any other testimony in support of the application?
And either send me a text message or raise your hand.
Do we have any for neutral testimony? They're neither in favor of or against the proposal? It's kind of clunky here. I'm going to also ask anybody in opposition.
CC has got.
Okay, yeah, there's someone. All right.
All right.
So you should be able to unmute and show, yep. Okay. Great,
Hi.
I think we can hear you.
There's actually two of us here. This is Dr. Rosemary Clement and my husband, Charles Kastner. We live at 155 South First Street. And there's a couple issues I'd like to bring up. First of all, I'd like to thank Steve for realizing that this would significantly impact our view on his own and withdraw that second story. But I do have issues with the planning and how this was handled. And I would like to hope that we could address this and look at it, and maybe other people don't have to go through the stress that we went through over this, that I consider unnecessary and disrespectful to us as taxpayers. So I'd like to know if any consideration was even made with the history of this house and the obstruction of views that have already occurred on this historic 106-year-old piece of property. There's significant amount of obstruction that have occurred over the years, and this was the one last section that was completely open. And I feel that that was never considered. No one came up on my porch or looked out from inside of my house to see how this would impact us. I really have a problem that miscalculated, because this would have been extremely to our property. You know, you can look at it as a property value, but that's what's more important to me as the purpose of living here was the view. And, you know, we could have lost that very easily. And a miscalculation isn't fair to us. So I'm very unhappy with this process right now. I'm also unhappy that we had 11 days to respond. And yes, the burden and onus was on us. No one contacted us other than a letter that did not give us 14 days notice to respond. We were required to produce photos, documents. It was a big burden on us. The other thing is my husband and I both travel quite a bit, and luckily we were here because of the pandemic, but we could have missed that window, and it would have greatly impacted our property. And I think there would have been some legal action taken from us. I also have a problem with the wording of 50% obstruction of the view. And my understanding is that is not in line with the state of Oregon's definition of what would be an obstruction of view. And I would like you guys to look at that and make sure it is in alignment with the state of Oregon's wording. And that's all I've got. I just glad you got to hear me out, and I appreciate Steve Pelgrim's honorable action, but it really could have gone another way very easily. I'm going to turn it over to my husband.
Well, although I'm the attorney, she just did a better job than me in stating what we wanted to state. Well, I'll leave it at that. I mean, it has been, and I'll also echo my appreciation to Steve and voluntarily taking the action that he has done on this. I think our frustration again was with the kind of the timing, and I've already expressed this to Jenny in conversation I had with her, and I appreciate her reaching out to me on a couple times to talk to me about it. But in the notice that we got, it just kind of hit me wrong initially when it said that, as of this date, there have been no objections received to this proposal. And, being the attorney and the logical thinker, I'm sitting there going, well, this is the first I've even heard of it. When should I have filed an objection? So that made me wonder exactly what the process was. Jenny explained to me that this really was the first notice to come out and everything, but just the wording in the notice that came out from the city planning administrator just kind of made me a little bit, I guess, concerned about the process because of that. But again, I appreciate it. And as Rosemary said, and I'm not sure if our neighbor is going to talk too, but the timing, our neighbor was out on military leave for an extended period of time and got back, I think, within less than 4 days of needing to have the response in. So it's tough. And I know Jenny's explained to me that unfortunately that's the timing that is prescribed, but that's just a concern of ours. Thank you.
Did your neighbor want to talk? He's in the room, right? Is that correct?
No, he's next door.
Oh, okay. Before, I thought you said he was in the new room.
No, I see his name up there and his phone number, but I wasn't sure if he was planning on talking or not.
I have a question for you. Since this hearing is about the setback, not about the view ordinance, do you have an opposition or a positive feeling about the setback from the road? That's what we're deciding here today.
Sure, and as I told Jenny, and I did not remove our objection to that because the second floor still had not been, officially removed. If there's not going to be a second floor, I do not have a problem with the request for the variance for the setback. If there was a second floor on there, I would still have a problem because that would then even push the elevated second floor even closer to the roadway, making the obstruction even, that much more significant, I guess, is the way I put it.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions of this testimony?
Okay, we do have Derek Frazier would like to speak.
Okay, go ahead, Derek. Unmute yourself if Jenny can let you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So I would just like to, add to what Rosemary and Charlie said. I want to thank Steve for doing the right thing. And it's pretty amazing that, it was that quick that I turned in that letter, and I did the same thing. I shot an azimuth and did all that scientific stuff, but, I really want to elaborate on thanking Steve. And I think it's amazing that he's getting rid of that old salon and, improving the street in that aspect. And I think that that you should grant his variance. I think it's amazing that, he's cleaning that place up, and I'm just really happy about, the outcome of this. And yes, I was on military training when I got this letter. I understand the timelines are rough, when the letters go out, but, maybe a process to kind of, try to make phone calls or something to improve the process. But other than that, I'm pretty pleased with the outcome of tonight.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you.
So we actually have another opportunity for the applicant to make a rebuttal if you wish, or having a final statement. Steve?
Thank you. No, I have nothing else to say unless you have some other questions for me.
I just know my wife was disappointed you're going to tear down that structure. She wanted to fix it up and have a boutique out of it, but
She can have it. The structure off site. It's free. Just come get it.
okay. I don't want it on my place.
It's a historic building. You need it.
Okay, you got a place for it? All right. Thank you. Having no further questions from the commission and no further responses from staff, the public record is closed and this matter is returned to the table for deliberations and oral discussion.
My question is, will the garage stick out farther than the current carport?
So I can share my screen and show you. That's not the right document. Hold on just a second. The answer is yes. I don't know the exact amount though. Are there other questions while I pull this up? Sorry, guys, I closed the PDF for some
I'm just
reason.
thinking that that's gonna make that garage closer to the street than any other homes on the street, but yet there's still enough to safely go out of the driveway.
Yeah, it's
Clearly
certainly
that-
improving the situation, but it's kind of the worst case situation possible.
Right.
So yeah, that's a good question to ask. Okay.
Entrance to the garage is on the street side.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I
So
think
the
it's come-
entrance
from the
into the
north.
garage is, so you pull in like this to the garage.
From the street.
Oh, it's side loaded.
Yes,
Okay, from the side.
yes.
So that'll be good.
We don't have an elevation that shows the old carport and the new garage, it looks like. Just the new stuff going.
Yeah, the elevations were pretty frustrating and took me a long time to decipher what was new and what was being added. And it was multiple rounds of revisions to those plans as well. So I was equally frustrated by that, Dan.
Mhm. Would have answered that question quickly if we'd seen that.
So to answer your question, Jennifer, this is the end of the carport now.
Oh,
You know, I'd have to pull out my to scale plans. If I were to estimate, it looks like 6 feet,
I'm
maybe
trying to
seven,
visualize it.
seven
Yeah.
feet. Yeah. To get you an exact number, I'd have to roll out the set and get my scale out. And yeah, I can show that elevation too. So here's kind of that distance you're freeing up.
Yeah. Well,
If
even
we say-
granting the variance, getting rid of the building gives us a better sight line.
Yeah, are we allowed to, if we grant the variance, to have any requirements of, I mean, aesthetically, as you're driving down that wonderful historic street with all those historic houses in there, and you're looking at the side of a garage. I don't know, it'd be nice if it was aesthetically. I'm not even sure what the word I'm thinking, I apologize, it's late here.
Consistent?
Yeah, well, you know, I know there's cities that require that you're not looking at only the garage as the front of the house, and they want to see front porches and different things. And so I'm just wondering what we're going to be looking at. And it's already not consistent. It's the only mid-century-ish
Yeah.
house in there. There was a home that came down there. I think it was the Turner house that came down well before this. So
I'm wondering if there's room for some shrubbery alongside the new garage wall between there and the sidewalk.
if it gets too tall, then it'll interrupt the site visit view again.
Yeah, no.
Well, you don't have to buy shrubbery that's going to get to be 23 feet tall. You can,
Well, we
choose-
don't want anything on the street.
It's a part, looks like a parking lot right now, so I'm thrilled that they're putting the kind of driveway they are in. I think that's a great solution.
Just 2 properties down, there's those carports in front of the apartments, so they're already sticking way out.
Yeah,
I think we need a set of plans.
I
we
think
can
it's a
look at.
big improvement.
I have no disagreement with that. I agree with you. It is an improvement.
Big improvement. And for people walking down the street, it's wonderful.
However, looking at Google Earth Street View, there's some very large bushes on the adjacent property. You go out just as far as that building does.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how they enter their property, because I would guess that they encroach as they drive into that property next door. They're gonna have to do something about a driveway there, I would think.
Don't we have required radiuses for when you back out of a place and what should be in that area residentially?
they won't have to back out onto the street.
They're not going to back out in the street, right?
No,
Okay.
No, they
So
wouldn't have to.
What are the radiuses there, and if that has all been engineered?
I mean, I don't know the answer to this question, Jacob.
Well, I guess what I'm looking at is we're piecemealing this whole thing together, and here you want us to make a decision on certain things.
So we're only asking the decision about the footprint of the variance request tonight. The height is still to be determined with those revised set of plans.
And then we'll be totally out of the picture. So
Because your purview is the variance request tonight. The scenic resource review gets reviewed administratively, taking into account neighbor testimony. The only reason that it's involving you to begin with is this variance request. I definitely get the frustration of not having a revised set of plans, and I thought this issue might come up with kind of muddying the waters.
well, I've been before you guys and invested thousands and thousands of dollars and, get kicked back with, where's my mailbox gonna go? Things like that. So I guess, if I've got to show everything so detailed like this, and then they say, well, we'll cut off the top floor, but then that's it. I mean, and then we're talking about shrubs and what the siding's gonna be, and I don't know.
There is a higher standard for commercial and multi-development above a single family dwelling.
Touche.
Right, only for you.
Jenny, can you go back to the site plan?
Sure.
So we know this is a 58-foot wide lot, and we know at the bottom we have about 8 feet 4 inches and then another 3 feet. And so that leaves us with 26 feet or so between the north property line and the north side, or the face of the garage.
One correction there, Jacob, the 8.5 is full width. It's not 3 + 8. This is the full distance here.
Yes, the 8 feet 4 inches plus the 23-foot width of the garage carport.
Yep. Yes. Okay.
Yep. So that gives us about 26. An average car, unless it's a big old truck, is 18 feet long or less. And it should provide, there should be enough area so someone could back out, back up, and then leave head first. That's something that we're going to want to make sure, because of the type of street that First is. It's a collector or
Yes.
arterial collector.
It's collector.
So we have standards that say, we don't want to design that facilitates maneuvering or backing in the street. We have at times needed to see turning radius diagrams. That really hasn't been in the discussion. on this one, especially because it's kind of a side-facing garage. But it is a variance and it is including a garage, so if it's a concern of the commission, that could be something for consideration. And it could be something you see later, or you just make it a condition to show, turning radii for a standard passenger vehicle to demonstrate that maneuvering or backing into the
doable.
street is not necessary. That's fair. It's a fair condition.
I think it's a fair condition and a good idea.
Right.
The practical aspect, looking at Google Earth Street View again, is the neighbor has a contiguous asphalt, and I'm sure they're going to be backing into that space all the time.
Mhm.
Mm.
To get it to move sometimes.
Yeah, I don't know why it's not. But it's a good
Turn it a
point.
little bit. Turn it a little bit.
This is old.
So when you're backing, are you going to know when you're edge of the property line? Probably not.
Seems like,
It's like the duplex site on Second, or I think it was Second, that we were talking about along the edge of the cliff. We want to make sure they didn't back into each other out of their two garages.
Now, in this case, you have this old circumstance where there's kind of this shared driveway scenario.
Right.
It's been like that for decades.
We'll just have them backup beepers on all the cars that use that.
well, we don't think we should penalize these guys if the neighbor chose to plant big trees in their driveway. So that they couldn't drive straight in, they have to.
They wouldn't want that anyway.
Yeah, they
their part.
utilize this space for their maneuvering room too, up here.
I think it just makes it less onerous to, I mean, we're only talking about this one property, but it's not just this one property that can move around in.
What did you mean by that, Dan? I don't understand.
What I mean is they're going to back into the property that's just asphalt, the neighbor's property. Although we as planners, we got to look at this and we go, okay, do they have all the space they need within their property?
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
I get that.
Does staff have a recommendation that?
Yeah, so there were a couple conditions I pulled up that I added to the staff report to address the fact that the scenic resource review hadn't been wrapped up yet. And I can pull those up again. So the first one was the one that Jacob noted around making sure that we have an approved scenic resource review. So that is added number 3. And then number 2 talks about the variance applying to the proposed plan as submitted or one with equal or less yard encroachment. And that's to allow for a revision that is a less request than what was originally submitted. And then the others were in the staff recommendation originally.
Right. I just couldn't remember in the conclusion if staff recommended approval with the following conditions.
Yep, with these 2 blue ones and added. So if we're leaning towards approval, it would be as recommended with added condition number 2 and 3, as read here.
So moved if we're ready for it.
Second,
All right, let's run through the roll call. Commissioner Lawrence,
Aye.
Commissioner Semling,
Aye.
Commissioner Pugsley,
Aye.
Commissioner, let me switch down here.
Webster.
Semling, did you already vote?
Ooh,
S- Hubbard, Commissioner Hubbard. Commissioner Webster,
yes.
did everyone vote? The screen switched to, got me confused, sorry.
Sorry about that.
Sorry. Okay,
So then this one will need a motion for signature as well.
So moved.
second. Is there a second?
Second.
Lawrence, your vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Semling, your vote?
Aye.
Pugsley? Hubbard? Webster?
Say aye, Russ.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
Webster, aye.
okay.
For the folks still on, like Steve said, revised plans are expected by the end of this week. His deadline for getting those to me, he had a rebuttal period for the scenic resource review, and that is April 20th. So at the very latest, you'll get an amended decision. If I receive nothing, then it will result in denial of that scenic resource review because there was no response. So that's where that track is. So you should get something in the mail with revised plans and then a new comment period.
Eve asked my wife if she wants that building.
Steve,
No.
Dan will be there to get that building in the morning.
Okay.
You just need a trailer hitch.
All right. Hearings are over. The planning director decisions that were previously emailed. Anybody have any? You want to talk about these temporary use permits?
Bring on the food trucks.
About
I want them to be open, though. They're closed all the time.
planning department activity report. Anything that jumped out at you there that you want to talk to Jacob about? Any for your information items that need to be brought?
I had an interesting piece in the mail the other day. I think we've got a parking problem on Portland Boulevard in Portland or Rosa Parks. They're putting a 31 unit apartment building in. But no parking because they're next to a bus stop. There's
Wow.
public transportation. Now, how do they approve something like that? No parking, zip.
Not required.
Yeah, they probably have a standard that says if you're adjacent to transit, you don't need parking.
That's
or
crazy.
Or some other standard.
Yeah,
There's 200 unit apartments going on in Portland with no parking. They don't require it.
that's crazy.
Yeah,
I have a coworker who lives in Northwest Portland and she doesn't want to move her car because she will never get a parking spot again.
I don't blame her.
so they expect light rail to take care of everything.
Well, light rail is on interstate and that cross would be Denver and Greeley. So
When we
that's
have air taxis, that'll help.
Air taxis?
Air taxis, yeah.
Yes, yes.
It's not far off. No, that's real stuff.
So are we talking about George Jetson and his lovely wife and their boy Elroy?
Yeah,
In a sense, I mean, there's prototypes out now for that kind of stuff.
Individual electric ones.
Jennifer's gonna fall asleep.
No, I'm just.
All right.
It's
think-
midnight.
I
It's
think we're
midnight for
done.
her.
Jennifer, you're in Florida, aren't you?
I am, and what time is it? It's late.
Midnight.
Right, let's let you go to
It's
bed.
midnight for
and
you.
let's adjourn.
Yeah, we don't have much. I just want to make sure that a couple of you haven't filed your annual statement of economic interest, which is due by the 15th. So make sure you do that. We had our city recorder staff wanted us to remind two of you who haven't done that. So make sure you do it. I don't know how punitive they are, but allegedly there's a fine or something, and it's due by the 15th. I think it's all online too.
Yes, and I
It
just
is
did mine.
online.
I just did mine today, and every year I can never figure out my password, and all the questions don't work. And anyway, at the bottom of it, there's a phone number, and they're very kind. They'll fix you right up. So
I haven't seen any of that. So I think maybe I'll be visiting before I leave here.
you go to your email, and Christina should have sent you a link to the online thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll try to help you through that, Catherine.
Or they send it around the 15th. Look for March 15 in your emails.
We could take care of that offline.
Thank you.
June is when we're supposed to talk about, well, June is when the annual report to the council is, and I'm bringing up a couple months early. The last time you said you wanted to talk with the council, but not via Zoom in person, and we never really had a chance. The council is talking about meeting in person again. So you're probably tired and don't want to talk about it now. I just wanted to at least bring it up. So be thinking about report to council, and if you want to try to attempt an in-person meeting.
Aren't they meeting in person on Thursday for the tourism thing?
Oh, so yeah. So yeah, we have begun some limited meetings. Those have been primarily like very limited attendance, but I do think that is something we could look at. I know the mayor gave direction to John Walsh about steps for having city council meetings back in person, but I think we could do it. We even had that public safety facility forum at the middle school in person with proper distancing. So I think this could certainly be, I'd be willing to support that if you all are with continued proper precautions. But I'm thinking, I'm not sure where that space might be. The Thursday ones that we're doing at the recreation center, that space is limited, but I'm not quite sure if it can be arranged to have a larger audience that would be, say, limited to planning commission and city council, but it's possible, perhaps.
Yeah, I have a friend that had her first vaccine and she was supposed to come here. She had to cancel because she tested positive for COVID. And she had her first
Granddaughter, she got the shot and the next day she was positive.
Yeah.
Came in.
Well, that's Rosie.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's
Thanks.
Sydney.
That's something more positive of interest. Tomorrow is the first TAC meeting for the Riverwalk project, and I'm going to be a part of that. This is going to be fun.
Oh, good.
Exciting.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
2 night meetings in a row.
Woohoo! This is earlier. Okay, all right. Should we go?
Yep, I think we're good.
Right. Go to bed, Jennifer. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.